You know his voice, even if you don't know his name. Whisperin' Bill Anderson isn't just a country singer. He's a living thread that ties the golden age of Nashville to the world we know today. At 87 years old, he's still writing songs, still keeping to himself, and still carrying the quiet confidence of a man who's seen it all. While others chased fame with fireworks, Bill made a legacy with a whisper. But what does his life actually look like now? Off stage, away from the spotlight. Where does he live? What kind of car does a country legend drive? What happened to his marriages, his children, and his millions? This is the untold story of Bill Anderson's lifestyle today. And it's not what most people expect, because while the charts moved on and the crowds got younger, Bill Anderson kept whispering his way through history and into something far more valuable than fame: longevity, peace, and a life built one lyric at a time. Long before he was known as Whisperin' Bill, he was just James William Anderson III, a quiet kid growing up in Columbia, South Carolina, and later in Decatur, Georgia. His voice wasn't booming, and he didn't strum a guitar with the fire of a rebel. But what he did have was a pen, and that pen changed everything. While attending the University of Georgia, studying journalism of all things, Bill wrote a song that would define his future. It was called City Lights, and it got picked up by none other than Ray Price. The track soared to #1 in 1958 and stayed there for weeks. Suddenly, a college kid became one of the most talked about young writers in Nashville. From there, it was a slow and steady rise. Bill wasn't flashy. He didn't wear rhinestones or belt into the mic. He had a whisper, a twang, and an unmatched ability to make you feel something deep. His breakthrough hits like Still, Mama Sang a Song, I Get the Fever, and Po Folks weren't just country music. They were country life, laid bare and bruised, sung gently enough to hush a honky-tonk. By the 1960s, Bill had become a staple at the Grand Ole Opry. Not just performing, he became one of its pillars. But Bill wasn't just a singer, he was a songwriter's songwriter. While he stacked hits of his own, he was quietly writing hits for others. Connie Smith, George Strait, Brad Paisley, Kenny Chesney, and even artists outside of country. In a business that burns fast and forgets even faster, Bill found his power behind the curtain, earning royalties, shaping the future of the genre, and always staying relevant without chasing trends. Through it all, he stayed humble. He didn't chase the biggest spotlight, but he built the most enduring one. For every million-dollar moment he had, he reinvested in the music, recording, writing, supporting others. By the time most of his peers had faded out or flamed out, Bill was still whispering, still working, and still proving that sometimes the softest voice leaves the deepest echo. For all the songs he wrote about love, heartbreak, and family, Bill Anderson's own personal life has seen its fair share of emotional turbulence. In 1959, just as his music career was beginning to catch fire, Bill married Bette Anderson. Together they had 2 children, Jamie and Terry, and for a time, it looked like he had the perfect country life: a beautiful young family, a rising career, and a future paved in music and memories. But as his fame grew, so did the distance. The late nights, long tours, constant studio sessions, and public demands made it harder to be present at home. Fame gave him everything, and yet it quietly chipped away at his marriage. After a decade together, Bill and Bette divorced in 1969. It was quiet, but not painless. Years later, Bill would try again. His second marriage, this time to Becky Anderson, seemed like a fresh start, but the old patterns returned. The music industry never really sleeps, and neither did Bill. Always writing, always working, always pulled in a dozen directions. His second marriage, like the first, ended in divorce. For a man who could put any emotion into a perfect 3-minute song, love in real life didn't come with an easy melody. Still, Bill never lost his bond with his children. He has spoken fondly of Jamie and Terry in interviews, calling them his greatest treasures. They didn't chase fame, and they never became tabloid material. Instead, they stayed close, especially in his later years. Family gatherings, holidays, Birthdays, they became sacred. Bill might have missed a lot in the earlier years, but he's tried to make up for it in the time he has now. But perhaps the most devastating personal blow came in 2021, when Bill lost his beloved granddaughter. The pain of that moment still lingers. He doesn't speak about it much publicly, but the sorrow is there, in his eyes, in his voice, and in the occasional lyric that cuts a little deeper than usual. Behind all the awards, the honors, and the smiling public appearances, there's a man who knows what it's like to hurt deeply. Bill Anderson didn't just write songs about heartbreak, he lived them. Bill Anderson doesn't live in a flashy mansion perched high in the Hollywood Hills, nor does he reside in some sprawling Texas ranch surrounded by steel gates and security cameras. Instead, at 87 years old, he's chosen a quieter, more grounded life rooted deeply in the place that gave him everything. Nashville, Tennessee. His home is tucked away in a peaceful suburb just outside the city, far from the flashing lights of Broadway and the endless noise of downtown. It's the kind of neighborhood where the mailman still waves, and neighbors still drop off casseroles during hard times. His house is modest by celebrity standards, but it holds something far more valuable than marble floors and chandeliers. History. The walls are lined with decades of memories, gold records, handwritten lyrics, black and white photos of Bill sharing stages with legends like Patsy Cline, George Jones, and Little Jimmy Dickens. In one corner, there's an old guitar that's worn down from use, not for show. There's a sunroom where he writes, and a porch where he sips his morning coffee while the birds sing. Bill's life has always been about simplicity, and his home reflects that perfectly. But that's not the only property he quietly owns. Somewhere in the Tennessee hills, far away from even the outskirts of Nashville, Bill has a private cabin, a retreat where he disappears when the world feels too loud. Friends say it's where he goes to write without distraction, walk through the trees, and reflect. The cabin has no internet, no modern distractions, just nature, notebooks, and memories. It's here that some of his most personal, unreleased work lives. Pages and pages of lyrics no one has heard and maybe never will. Despite being one of the most legendary figures in country music, Bill doesn't seek attention. He values peace, routine, and familiarity. While younger stars show off designer homes on social media, Bill Anderson stays true to who he's always been. A songwriter who built a home not just with wood and bricks, but with soul. His surroundings aren't loud, because they don't need to be. His life is rich with meaning, not material. Bill Anderson has never been the kind of star to flash his wealth. While some of his country music peers collected luxury cars, speedboats, and diamond-studded everything, Bill built a different kind of life. Quiet, intentional, and understated. But that doesn't mean he hasn't enjoyed the fruits of his long, successful career. He just did it his way. Back in the 1960s and 70s, Bill had a deep love for Cadillacs. He once called them a gentleman's way to travel, and for years, his prized vehicle was a 1965 Cadillac Coupe de Ville, gleaming with chrome and full of Southern swagger. He's kept it to this day, fully restored and housed in his garage, like a living monument to country music's golden era. It's not just a car, it's a memory on wheels. These days, Bill doesn't drive much himself, but when he does need to get around, it's usually in a comfortable, reliable Lincoln or Buick. Nothing flashy, just smooth and classic. Inside his home, the luxury comes in a different form. You won't find million-dollar art or high-tech entertainment rooms. Instead, you'll find priceless artifacts, a framed handwritten lyric sheet from Still, vintage microphones from his days on the Grand Ole Opry stage, and a custom-built bookshelf stacked with songwriting notebooks spanning over 6 decades. He even has a pair of boots worn during his first Opry performance, scuffed, cracked, and worth more to him than any car could ever be. His closet holds every embroidered jacket he ever wore on stage, custom-tailored for a man who made classy cowboy look effortless. Those nudie-style suits, with rhinestones and country flair, are preserved with care. each one tied to a different memory, a different song, a different chapter. And yes, he's a millionaire, though he rarely talks about it. Friends say Bill lives comfortably, not lavishly. He never needed to prove anything to anyone. His wealth is in what he's created, in what still echoes across radios, jukeboxes, and hearts. For Bill Anderson, true luxury isn't in what you show off, it's in what lasts. Behind Bill Anderson's soft voice and humble persona is a man with razor-sharp business instincts. From the very beginning, Bill didn't just chase chart toppers, he chased ownership. He understood something that many artists, even today, still overlook. The real money in music isn't always in the performance, it's in the publishing. That's why early in his career, Bill insisted on retaining the rights to his songs. When City Lights became a hit, he didn't just collect applause, he collected royalties. And those royalties didn't stop when the radio faded. They kept flowing, decade after decade. With over 1,000 songs to his name, Bill built a songwriting empire brick by brick. His compositions were recorded by everyone from George Strait to Kenny Chesney, and each play meant another check. He didn't need to tour constantly. His catalog worked for him while he slept. And Bill wasn't just smart with lyrics, he was smart with dollars. He reinvested his earnings into real estate, Nashville studio shares, and publishing rights that grew in value over time. In the 1990s and 2000s, while some of his contemporaries were fading from the public eye, Bill pivoted to television, hosting game shows and country music specials, not for fame, but for residuals and brand control. He knew how to keep his name relevant without exhausting himself. He also started speaking at music business seminars, mentoring younger artists on how to protect their work and avoid the traps he saw so many fall into. Today, his estimated net worth sits comfortably between $8 and $12 million. It's not just the result of hit songs, it's the result of structure, ownership, and a deep understanding of value. And unlike others who lost fortunes in divorce, lawsuits, or bad deals, Bill played it slow, played it safe, and played it smart. Whisperin Bill may have spoken softly, but when it came to business, he roared. Quietly, strategically, and always with purpose. At 87 years old, Bill Anderson doesn't move like he used to, but his spirit remains untouched. These days, his mornings start early. He's usually up before the sun, sitting on his back porch with a cup of coffee and a notepad. Sometimes he writes lyrics, sometimes just thoughts. He said in interviews that writing every day, even a single sentence, keeps him feeling young. That discipline has been with him his entire life. And now, more than ever, it's what grounds him. Physically, the years have taken their toll. He's dealt with arthritis in his knees and shoulders, the kind of quiet pain that lingers with age. There was also a health scare over a decade ago that forced him to slow down. Doctors told him to cut back on travel and stress. But Bill didn't see it as a curse. He saw it as a reason to finally pause and focus on the simple joys he'd missed during his whirlwind career. His routine is slow and intentional now. Breakfast is usually eggs, grits, and fruit. He avoids anything too heavy and drinks more water than he ever did in his touring days. Lunch is often light, salads or sandwiches, and dinner is Southern comfort food in moderation. Fried chicken might make a rare appearance, but he's more likely to opt for grilled fish these days. And while he used to enjoy the occasional drink back in the day, now it's sweet tea or water. He doesn't drive himself much anymore, relying on close friends or family to help him get around. On days when his joints allow, he walks a little in the garden or along the neighborhood paths. He says the stillness brings him clarity. But even with the physical slowdown, his mind is sharper than ever. He remembers names, dates, lyrics, stories. He's still got that steel-trap memory every songwriter envies. Though the stage isn't a regular place for him anymore, he still appears at the Grand Ole Opry, sometimes just to watch, sometimes to sing a line or two. The crowd always rises. The respect never fades. Bill Anderson may not be racing across the country anymore, but in every quiet step, every morning page, and every whispered word, he's still moving forward. gracefully, gratefully, and always in tune with the life he's built. Bill Anderson's legacy isn't defined by a single moment. It's defined by consistency, craftsmanship, and an unmatched ability to connect. With over 1,000 recorded songs to his name, he's not just a country singer, he's a country institution. His whisper became a signature. His lyrics became scripture for generations of artists who followed. But perhaps what's most remarkable is how he remained relevant across every era, from vinyl to streaming, from the Grand Ole Opry to YouTube retrospectives. He's a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame, the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame, and the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He's received the CMA's Song of the Year award, earned multiple Grammy nominations, and holds one of the longest-running memberships in Grand Ole Opry history, over 60 years. And yet, despite the accolades, Bill has always remained grounded. He's never let awards define him. In fact, he once said, "I don't write for trophies. I write for people." His influence spans generations. Brad Paisley has openly credited Bill as a mentor and songwriting hero. Taylor Swift cited his lyrical storytelling as an early inspiration. You can feel his fingerprints all over modern country music, even in artists who never met him. Because when you write truth, it echoes forever. His memoir, Whisperin, Bill Anderson, An Unprecedented Life in Country Music, offers a deeper look into his journey. Not just the glitz, but the grit. It's a testament to persistence, faith, and the power of words. And for fans who grew up on his music, it's a love letter to a life lived with purpose. Today, in his Nashville home, his walls are lined with awards, but right next to them are handwritten notes from fans, crayon drawings from grandkids, and black and white photos from the road. That's how Bill measures success, not by fame or fortune, but by connection. He's not just part of country music history, he is country music history, and he's still writing it. As Bill Anderson enters what may be the final chapter of his extraordinary life, there's no fear in his voice, only reflection. He's not chasing legacy, he's already built one. These days, life moves slowly, and Bill lets it. He takes time with his thoughts. He writes without deadlines. He smiles a little longer when family visits. And when fans write him letters, he reads every single one. Sometimes he even writes back, in longhand, the way he used to write his lyrics. In a world obsessed with noise, Bill chooses silence. He's traded the spotlight for sunrises, applause for peace, and the roar of the crowd for the whisper of memory. He's not as strong as he once was. The long walks have turned into short strolls. The once unstoppable hands that played guitar for hours now move more carefully. But the heart? It's still all there. His eyes still light up when he hears an old song on the radio, and he still gets emotional talking about the Opry, his fans, and the people he's loved and lost along the way. Regrets? Of course, he's been honest about them. Time missed with his children, marriages that ended quietly, the years when the road mattered more than the kitchen table. But Bill doesn't dwell. He's turned regret into gratitude. He's made peace with every note, every word, every silence. Now, more than ever, he values the little things. A hot meal, a phone call from an old friend, a grandchild's laugh. He once said, "I've lived loud enough through song that now I just want to listen." And that's exactly what he's doing. Listening, reflecting, whispering back at life as it slows down around him. When the day comes that Bill Anderson takes his final bow, it won't be a tragedy. It'll be a closing chapter on one of the most quietly powerful lives in country music history. And his whisper? It'll never really stop. It'll live on in the radio static between stations, in the verses sung softly at back porch gatherings, in the memories of fans who heard not just a voice, but a soul. Because Bill Anderson didn't need to shout to be heard. He whispered, and we listened. There's one more chapter to Bill Anderson's story that fans rarely talk about, but it may be the most important of all. His role as a quiet mentor and guardian of country music's soul. Long after the tours slowed down and the chart toppers faded, Bill never stopped giving back. Behind closed doors, he's helped guide countless young artists, songwriters, and producers, many of whom never publicly mention his name, but quietly carry his wisdom into every lyric they write. He's hosted songwriting workshops for veterans. He sat backstage at the Opry, listening to nervous newcomers, offering advice not with ego, but with care. People don't leave a conversation with Bill Anderson feeling impressed. They leave feeling understood. That's his gift. He's the kind of man who remembers your story, not just your name. In an industry that too often chews people up and spits them out, Bill has been a soft place to land. In recent years, he's used his platform to champion the value of storytelling in music. He's pushed back gently but firmly against the overly commercial wave sweeping through country radio. "If you forget the story," he once said, "you forget the soul." That's why, even in his 80s, he still collaborates with artists who care about lyrics. He doesn't chase trends. He preserves truth. He's also quietly supported music preservation charities, donated memorabilia to archives, and helped fund music education in small southern schools. He doesn't seek credit. He just believes in giving back to the genre that gave him everything. At 87, Bill Anderson is more than a country legend. He's a custodian of the music's heart, a keeper of the flame. And even when he's gone, his fingerprints will remain on every guitar string plucked in pain, every lyric scribbled in truth, and every soft-spoken verse sung beneath the stars. Because Bill's story didn't end with a final hit. It continues through every voice he helped shape. At 82 years old, Jessi Colter lives a life so private, it's practically become legend. Once the glamorous outlaw queen of country music, she now resides quietly between Arizona and Nashville, avoiding interviews, rarely appearing in public, and keeping her secrets close. But something strange happened in early 2024. Jessi granted a private interview to a small documentary crew, and what she hinted at during that conversation sent shockwaves through country circles. She spoke about a decision she made recently, one that could alter her entire legacy. Was it about Waylon's estate, a secret album, or something bigger? As the cameras rolled, she leaned in and said one sentence that still hasn't been aired. "They don't know what I still have hidden." From mysterious recordings to her distant relationship with Nashville and a jaw-dropping item she quietly sold in 2021, this is the story of Jessi Colter's quiet empire, her lost years, her millions, and the truth she's finally ready to share. Jessi Colter's current lifestyle is almost mythical in its mystery. At 82, she doesn't live in the heart of Nashville, nor does she occupy some Hollywood-style estate. Instead, she's tucked away in the Arizona desert, far from the music industry's reach, surrounded by sand, cacti, and the spirits of her past. Her primary residence is said to be a modest but beautifully rustic ranch-style home outside of Phoenix, with high wooden beams, Navajo rugs, and vintage country memorabilia tucked into every room. To the outside world, it might appear simple, but what's behind those walls tells a different story. Sources close to Jessi claim she's completely off the grid. No staff, no security detail, and barely a public footprint. She avoids the Opry, rarely takes calls from Nashville, and often spends days in solitude, writing in leather-bound journals, listening to old vinyl, or walking the desert at sunset. Some say she's completely at peace. Others think she's preparing for something, or someone. A secondary property in northern Arizona, kept even more private, is reportedly where Jessi keeps her personal archive. It's rumored to include handwritten lyrics from Waylon, unreleased tapes from her outlaw years, love letters, rare stage outfits, and a vault containing contracts, press clippings, and journals spanning back to the 1960s. This isn't a home, it's a museum that no one's allowed to enter. At least, not yet. Friends say she remains fiercely independent. She handles her finances, cooks her meals, and writes daily. And while her public performances have stopped, she's been seen occasionally singing alone on her back porch, accompanied by an old tape recorder and a dusty guitar. These moments are never recorded, never shared, just whispers carried by the Arizona wind. But the biggest mystery is what Jessi has planned. In the last year, she's turned down several interview requests from major networks and refused offers for a memoir. One insider claims she's waiting for the right time to drop something big, something that would reframe how the world sees her and what she meant to country music. Whether it's a final album, a secret film project, or an explosive confession, nobody knows, but she does. And that's exactly how Jessi Colter likes it. When it comes to family, Jessi Colter's world revolves around one person, her son, Shooter Jennings. The bond between Jessi and Shooter is not just one of mother and son, but of two artists carrying the same fire in very different ways. Jessi raised Shooter largely on the road, with a guitar in one hand and a bottle in the other, as Waylon Jennings blazed a path through outlaw country. But after Waylon's passing in 2002, their bond became even stronger, more private, and fiercely protective. Shooter often credits his mother as the reason he survived the chaos of the music world. Behind the scenes, Jessi wasn't just giving motherly advice. She was funding tours, helping him vet contracts, and even co-writing material without taking credit. There's a rumor, quiet but persistent, that one of Shooter's best-known songs actually started as a poem Jessi wrote during her years of silence after Waylon's death. Shooter denies it. Jessi just smiles when asked. She's also stepped quietly into the role of grandmother. Shooter has two children, and though Jessi keeps them far from the spotlight, she's described by family friends as the kind of grandmother who leaves handwritten notes in lunchboxes and sends books in the mail with post-its on her favorite pages. There are no family holiday photos on Instagram, no glossy People magazine features. Jessi has made it clear family is private, sacred, and off-limits to Nashville's cameras. But even in this close-knit bond, there have been quiet tensions. Insiders whisper about disagreements over how Waylon's estate was handled, what should be sold, what should be locked away, and who should speak for his legacy. One deal in particular, involving a streaming platform's rights to rare Waylon sessions, caused a brief fracture between Jessi and Shooter. Neither has ever addressed it publicly, but it's one of the few times the outlaw queen and her son were reportedly on opposite sides of the business. Still, despite everything, Jessi remains the anchor of her family. Birthdays, holidays, and even late-night calls still go through her. And it's said that before Shooter signs off on any major project, he sends it to one person first, his mother. At 82, Jessi Colter is no longer just a survivor of country music's wildest era. She's the matriarch of a family with deep roots, complicated legacies, and an unshakable bond. The spotlight may have dimmed, but the fire in her family still burns because Jessi lit it. When it comes to style, Jessi Colter never chased trends. She defined them. Even now, at 82, her wardrobe tells the story of a woman who's lived on her own terms. Friends say she still steps out in embroidered Western jackets, bold turquoise jewelry, and her signature boots, some of which date back to her early days with Waylon Jennings. She doesn't dress for anyone but herself, and that confidence radiates in the rare public photos that surface. But what surprises many fans is her subtle taste for luxury. She's not flashy, but she appreciates quality, and it shows in the quiet details of her life. Take her cars, for instance. Locals in Phoenix have spotted her cruising in a jet-black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows and custom leather seats, reportedly a gift from Shooter. And tucked away in her garage is a vintage 1983 Mercedes-Benz SL, cherry red and fully restored. Rumor has it she bought it with one of her first big royalty checks from her solo career, and she's never let it go. One family friend joked that Jessi treats it like a sacred relic, driving it only once or twice a year on long, silent stretches of desert highway. But perhaps the most surprising part of Jessi's lifestyle is her relationship to music, specifically the unreleased kind. Tucked inside a fireproof storage cabinet in her northern Arizona property, is what some in the industry call the Lost Vault. It's said to contain over 30 unreleased songs, including duets with Waylon, scratch demos recorded in hotel rooms, and solo tracks Jessi never felt brave enough to release. One title, The Water's Still Cold, has become the stuff of legend among hardcore fans. Supposedly recorded just weeks after Waylon's death, it's described as raw, stripped down, and devastating. Jessi has never confirmed or denied its existence, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. She reportedly owns dozens of journals, handwritten lyrics, cassette tapes with long-lost song ideas, and even private video recordings from the 1970s. Nashville execs have offered her millions for access to the vault. She's said no every time. To Jessi, those recordings aren't just songs. They're pieces of a life that the world only saw in glimpses, a life of passion, pain, rebellion, and beauty. And while fans may beg for new music, Jessi's decision to hold on to it might be her boldest act of all. Because some stories, she believes, should only be told when the time is truly right. And Jessi Colter decides when that is. Financially, Jessi Colter has lived a life that blends quiet wealth with outlaw independence. While she was never the type to flaunt her success, those close to her say she's far from struggling. In fact, despite keeping a low profile, Jessi's net worth is estimated to be between $5 and $8 million, largely thanks to smart royalty arrangements, decades of publishing rights, and a few very strategic decisions that no one saw coming. In the late 2000s, as streaming services began changing the music landscape, Jessi quietly renegotiated several of her rights deals. While many legacy artists were being taken advantage of or forgotten, Jessi stood firm. She retained publishing rights to some of her biggest solo hits, like I'm Not Lisa, and she also secured a percentage of Waylon's posthumous catalog revenue. One music attorney described her as one of the outlaw wives who kept control of the paperwork while the boys partied. That quiet paperwork made her a fortune. She also cashed in at just the right time. In 2021, Jessi sold a portion of her publishing catalog for a reported $2.5 million to a private firm specializing in legacy music. But she was smart. She only sold non-essential tracks, keeping full control of the songs closest to her heart. That deal alone ensured she could live the rest of her life comfortably and still pass on a sizable inheritance to Shooter and her grandchildren. Another boost to her finances came from unexpected merchandise. In 2019, a limited edition vinyl reissue of her debut album sold out in hours. The project, initially planned as a small tribute, ended up generating 6 figures in profits, most of which went directly into Jessi's pocket. Since then, she's released only a few curated items through her personal team, a signed lyric sheet here, a custom guitar strap there, each drop meticulously planned and sold out in minutes. She's also invested smartly. Close sources say she owns land near Sedona and has shares in a boutique Western clothing brand run by one of her extended family members. She's never flashy about it, but Jessi Colter is no struggling country widow. She's a businesswoman with grit and wisdom who built a quiet empire beneath the spotlight's glare. And even now, she still signs her own checks, oversees her taxes, and makes every decision with intention. Jessi Colter didn't just survive Nashville's wild ride, she outplayed it. And her bank account is the quiet proof. Despite her wealth and legacy, Jessi Colter's health and daily lifestyle at 82 reveal a woman grounded in simplicity, solitude, and quiet resilience. Those closest to her describe her as sharp as ever, still scribbling down lyrics and occasionally picking up a guitar just to see if the words still feel right when sung. But beneath her composed exterior, there are the undeniable signs of age. Aches in her joints, slower movements, and the occasional fatigue that reminds her she's not the fireball she once was on stage with Waylon at her side. She's kept mostly out of the public eye for the last decade, not due to illness, but because she simply doesn't want to be seen in the way the world demands of icons. Her eyesight isn't what it used to be, and she walks with a bit of a shuffle now, especially in the morning hours. Yet, Jessi insists on keeping her independence. She refuses full-time care and instead has a part-time assistant who checks in 3 days a week, mostly to handle errands and tech-related tasks. Her days start slow, usually with a black coffee on the porch, wrapped in a flannel robe, her hair tied back loosely, eyes scanning the Arizona horizon. She meditates each morning, something she picked up in the 1980s when trying to cope with Waylon's drug use and the chaos of fame. It stuck. Today, it's her anchor. Afterward, she writes, not always music, sometimes journal entries, sometimes letters she never sends. One room in her Arizona home is lined with spiral notebooks, many of them filled with decades of thoughts, confessions, and observations. It's said that she told a friend, "If anyone ever reads those, they'll know who I really was." Her meals are simple, lots of fruits, vegetables, grilled meats. She avoids alcohol now, though she'll occasionally pour a single glass of red wine at dusk, sitting quietly with a candle lit, remembering nights spent on tour buses and in green rooms. She watches old westerns on DVD and listens to vinyl more than anything streamed. Her phone rarely rings, and when it does, she decides if she wants to answer. She's earned that right. And yet, in all this calm, there's an undercurrent of energy. Jessi still records voice memos when melodies strike. She's working, quietly, on something. What? No one really knows. A final album? A memoir? A documentary? She's not saying, but if history has taught us anything, it's this. Jessi Colter never moved unless she had something to say, and at 82, she may be moving slower, but the message she's preparing might just be the loudest yet. Jessi Colter's relationship with the Grand Ole Opry has always been complicated. On paper, she was everything the Opry should have celebrated. An original, a pioneer, a woman who held her own in a genre dominated by outlaw men. But in reality, Jessi was often left on the fringes, not banned, not ignored, but never truly embraced the way she should have been. And now, at 82, she's finally starting to talk about it. In a rare off-camera conversation with a family friend, later confirmed by Shooter, Jessi reportedly said, "They loved Waylon, but they never knew what to do with me." For decades, the Opry had a narrow idea of what female country singers were supposed to sound like, dress like, act like. Jessi, with her velvet voice, edgy lyrics, and defiant spirituality, didn't fit the mold. She was too soulful, too wild, too married to a rebel who openly criticized Nashville's power structures. Her few appearances at the Opry were polite but cold. She was often introduced as Mrs. Waylon Jennings, rather than as a headliner in her own right. And despite multiple chart-topping singles, she was never invited to become a full-fledged member. According to one insider, there was a moment in the mid-1980s when her name was floated for induction, only to be quietly passed over in favor of a younger, more traditional artist. Jessi never made a fuss. She never called them out publicly, but privately, she kept her distance. She once said in a 1993 interview, "The Opry always felt like a place for certain people. I sang from the soul. That didn't fit the dress code." But the deeper mystery comes from a letter she supposedly received in 2022, an invitation to return to the Opry stage for a tribute event. Jessi declined. No explanation, no press release, just a handwritten note returned with a single line. "The time for flowers has passed." What did that mean? Fans and journalists speculated for weeks. Was it bitterness? Was it closure? Or was it a coded message for the industry that had sidelined her for so long? Whatever the truth, Jessi's relationship with the Opry remains a quiet wound, one she wears with grace, but hasn't quite healed. And at 82, her silence on the matter says more than any speech ever could. She may never step onto that stage again, but make no mistake, Jessi Colter's shadow still falls across the floorboards. And maybe, just maybe, that's more powerful than applause. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Jessi Colter's life is her deep spirituality. It's not performative. It's not for the cameras. It's the quiet flame that's guided her through heartbreak, fame, and solitude. Long before the world saw her as the outlaw queen alongside Waylon Jennings, Jessi was already searching for something higher. And at 82, that search has only deepened. Raised in a strict Pentecostal home in Arizona, Jessi's early life was shaped by hymns, tent revivals, and a sense that music could be both holy and healing. Her mother was a preacher, and Jessi played piano in the church long before she ever saw a stage. While she rebelled against certain religious constraints as she got older, she never walked away from her faith. She just reshaped it into something personal, sacred, and unshakable. During the darkest years of Waylon's addiction, Jessi was the one who prayed over him, sang to him, and pulled him back from the brink. In interviews, she often described their love as heaven sent but tested by hell. She leaned heavily on her faith, not just the version she grew up with, but her own private blend of scripture, intuition, and spiritual resilience. Even her 2006 gospel album, Out of the Ashes, was born from this internal fire, a project she said came from both praise and pain. These days, Jessi keeps a prayer room in her home. Small, windowless, filled with candles, old Bibles, and letters from fans she's prayed for. It's said she spends hours there on Sundays, not out of obligation, but because it's where she feels closest to the people she's lost. Her mother, her siblings, and of course, Waylon. She doesn't attend church anymore. She says God walks with her on the desert trail behind her home, where she takes slow steps at dusk and talks out loud to the sky. In recent months, she started writing what close friends describe as a spiritual reckoning, part poem, part memoir, part prayer journal. She hasn't said if it will ever be released, but one friend who read a draft said, "It's like reading the soul of a woman who's seen both heaven and hell and still believes in the light." Jessi Colter's spirituality isn't just a belief system. It's a survival strategy. It's how she stayed strong when Nashville ignored her, when Waylon was lost in darkness, and when loneliness crept into her quiet desert nights. Her faith is stitched into every note she ever sang, every word she ever wrote. And even now, it's the one thing she refuses to compromise. As Jessi Colter enters the twilight of her life at 82, her legacy is becoming more powerful than ever, because it's not just built on chart positions or gold records, but on endurance, grace, and quiet rebellion. In a world that often forgot her name while praising the men around her, Jessi endured. She didn't shout. She didn't demand the spotlight. She simply lived, wrote, and waited for the world to come around. And now, it finally is. Younger generations are rediscovering her music, not as a footnote to Waylon's story, but as a powerful voice in her own right. Her early albums are getting reissued on vinyl. Her gospel work is being praised as ahead of its time. And on social media, her lyrics are quoted by fans who weren't even alive when her biggest hits first aired. Jessi is becoming something rare in country music, a symbol of authentic femininity, strength, and soulful resistance. She's also mentoring quietly. Shooter Jennings has confirmed that his mother reviews his lyrics, offers guidance, and gives feedback that cuts right to the bone. But she's not just shaping her son. She's responded to letters from young female artists, some struggling with the same battles Jessi fought decades ago. One singer, now a Grammy winner, said, "Jessi told me to never apologize for writing the truth. That changed everything for me." And behind the scenes, Jessi is preparing something for the world, though no one's exactly sure what. Some say she's recording a final spoken word album. Others claim she's piecing together a memoir that spares no one. A few even whisper about a private documentary she's filming on her own terms, with no outside producers. Whatever it is, those who've caught a glimpse say it's raw, reflective, and unforgettable. But Jessi isn't racing against time. She's never lived that way. She moves slowly, intentionally. She believes that some things only matter when revealed at the right moment, and if her entire life has been one long lesson in timing, then perhaps this final chapter will be her most profound. In the end, Jessi Colter didn't just survive the country music machine, she rewrote the rules by refusing to play the game. She stayed human, she stayed soulful, and now, from her quiet place in the desert, she watches as the world begins to understand. At 68 years old, Dwight Yoakam isn't slowing down. He's just living quieter, smarter, and deeper than ever before. The denim-clad icon who once shook up country music with his rebellious sound now lives a life shrouded in privacy and elegance. Behind the hat and the Hollywood smile is a man with a fortune built over 4 decades, a secret wedding that stunned fans, and a lifestyle that screams cowboy cool and millionaire mystery. From muscle cars to multi-million-dollar estates, from acting in Hollywood blockbusters to releasing surprise albums, Dwight's story didn't stop at the charts. It only got more interesting, and what's unfolding now may be the most surprising chapter yet. Long before the world knew his name, Dwight Yoakam was just a restless boy from Pikeville, Kentucky. Born in 1956 and raised in Columbus, Ohio. While others were listening to pop, Dwight was absorbing the raw grit of Buck Owens, Merle Haggard, and the sounds of the Bakersfield scene. He didn't fit into the Nashville mold, and he never tried to. That stubborn streak would become his greatest asset. In the early 80s, he packed up for Los Angeles, playing punk clubs with a honky-tonk twang that confused the crowds at first, but soon had them cheering. It was a bizarre blend, country music in a punk scene. But Dwight saw something no one else did, the power of standing out. When Nashville refused to play his songs, he doubled down. His debut album, Guitars, Cadillacs, etc., etc., in 1986, hit like a lightning bolt. It went platinum, won him awards, and made it clear. This wasn't a passing trend. He was here to stay. But with the fame came money, and with money, choices. Most stars bought mansions and made headlines. Dwight, he kept one boot in the spotlight and the other firmly in the shadows. He never chased pop charts. Instead, he crafted a legacy, album after album, tour after tour. Critics called him a throwback. Fans called him a savior. Dwight simply called it music. What few realized then was that he wasn't just building a sound. He was building an empire, quietly, methodically, and on his own terms. And behind that curtain, a personal life that would stay secret for decades. For decades, Dwight Yoakam was country music's most elusive heartthrob. With his piercing stare, slim jeans, and that signature tilted cowboy hat, he had no shortage of admirers, on and off stage. He was rumored to be romantically linked to A-list actresses like Sharon Stone and Bridget Fonda, though none of those stories were ever fully confirmed. He played the game of fame like a pro, giving the world his voice, but keeping his heart locked behind closed doors. That all changed in 2020. In the midst of a global pandemic, Dwight quietly married longtime girlfriend Emily Joyce. No paparazzi, no fanfare, just a simple ceremony at an undisclosed location with only a few witnesses, and even those were socially distanced. The couple had been together for nearly a decade by then, but Dwight had kept the relationship almost entirely out of the public eye. And here's what surprised fans even more. Emily was nearly 3 decades younger than Dwight, a professional photographer with a calm presence and sharp creative eye. Emily had been by Dwight's side for years, often seen behind the camera during his photo shoots, rarely in front of it. In the same announcement that revealed their marriage, Dwight also dropped another bombshell. He was a father. At 63, Dwight Yoakam became a dad for the very first time. The couple welcomed a son, Dalton Lauren Yoakam, ushering in a new, unexpected chapter of fatherhood for the country legend. And true to form, Dwight never made a spectacle of it. No baby magazine spreads, no media interviews, just a simple statement and a return to his private life. Those close to the couple describe Emily as Dwight's anchor. She handles much of the behind-the-scenes business, helps manage his brand, and protects their young son from the spotlight. Together, They've created a quiet sanctuary, far removed from the chaos of the music industry. It's a love story written in the margins, not the headlines. And for a man like Dwight, that's exactly how he wanted it. Dwight Yoakam isn't one for red carpet tours of his home. In an age where celebrities flaunt their mansions on Instagram and give guided YouTube walkthroughs, Dwight prefers something else entirely: privacy. And yet, behind the walls of his hidden properties lies a lifestyle as curated as his music. His main residence is believed to be a secluded estate in California, nestled away from the chaos of Los Angeles, where winding driveways and towering hedges protect what insiders call a modern Western sanctuary. The home features everything you'd expect from a music legend: walls lined with vintage guitars, shelves packed with vinyl, a private recording studio, and decor that blends rustic Americana with rock and roll edge. Think cowhide rugs, weathered leather chairs, and original artwork from country's golden era. He's also owned a classic home in the Hollywood Hills, purchased back in his early film career days. That property, reportedly restored by Dwight himself, was a 1950s-style mid-century gem, with floor-to-ceiling windows and panoramic views, a place where he could play music while watching the California sunset bleed into the hills. But what truly reflects his soul is the lesser-known ranch he retreats to, just outside of town. There, the land stretches wide, and the noise fades. It's where he goes to write, to be with his family, and to recharge. Locals say he's often seen in jeans and a worn-out flannel shirt, feeding horses, walking the land, or simply strumming his guitar under the open sky. Despite his wealth, Dwight never built a kingdom of excess. His homes aren't about showing off. They're about shutting out the world. There's no golden gates, no flashy marble statues, just space, silence, and stories. And somewhere inside those walls, a man who once stood on some of the world's biggest stages now finds his peace in the quiet. Because for Dwight, home was never about fame. It was about freedom. If you want to understand a man like Dwight Yoakam, don't look at his stage costumes. Look at his garage. Beneath the cool, controlled image, and behind the private ranch gates, lies a car collection that is pure rockabilly Americana. Equal parts nostalgia, horsepower, and attitude. Dwight has never been loud about his vehicles, but those who've caught glimpses know this much: his taste is immaculate, and every machine tells a story. His prized possessions include vintage Cadillacs that look like they rolled straight out of a 1950s country song. One of the crown jewels? A powder blue 1959 Cadillac Eldorado Biarritz convertible. Sleek tail fins, white wall tires, chrome accents so polished you can see your reflection in them. This isn't just a car, it's a time capsule, a nod to an era Dwight has always honored in his music. But the collection doesn't stop there. He's also been spotted with a jet black 1967 Pontiac GTO, an absolute muscle beast that purrs with authority and demands respect on the road. Then there's the rumor of a cherry red 1955 Chevy Bel Air coupe, reportedly customized with hidden modern upgrades under the hood, but kept period correct in its outward charm. Fans have occasionally spotted him pulling up to venues or small-town diners behind the wheel of these classics, always dressed like he just stepped off a vinyl album cover. And when he's not cruising in a car, he's riding his motorcycle, most famously a custom Harley-Davidson Softail. Matte black, low-slung, and built for comfort and speed, it reflects the rebel edge Dwight has always carried with him. What's fascinating is that he rarely flaunts these rides. No flashy photo shoots, no revving engines on social media. Instead, he lets the cars speak when he's in them. For Dwight, a car isn't a toy, it's an extension of his identity. These vehicles aren't just machines, they're moving monuments to the past. They remind us of a time when style had soul and speed came with steel. And like Dwight himself, they've only gotten more valuable with age. Dwight Yoakam didn't just conquer country music, he crossed over into Hollywood and carved out a second empire with quiet precision. While most artists struggle to reinvent themselves outside their primary craft, Dwight walked into acting like he belonged there, and the camera couldn't look away. His breakout performance in Sling Blade, 1996, where he played the emotionally volatile Doyle Hargraves, left critics stunned. It wasn't just a good role, it was unforgettable, gritty, real, and raw. The same qualities that made his music cut deep were suddenly being broadcast to movie audiences around the world. From there, Dwight became a go-to character actor. He brought tension to Panic Room alongside Jodie Foster, levity to Wedding Crashers, and mystery to the Newton Boys. But it wasn't about quantity. Dwight chose roles carefully, often playing morally gray, unpredictable men. And because he played them so well, the checks kept coming. He didn't just take on acting for fame. It was strategy. Hollywood money is different. Residuals, royalties, producer credits. Dwight knew that. He negotiated smartly, retained creative control when he could, and built relationships with directors who respected his artistry. Behind the scenes, he quietly stacked checks. While other stars bought mansions they couldn't afford, Dwight played the long game. And he didn't stop there. His music career continued to evolve, sometimes under the radar, but always on his terms. He launched his own record label imprint, Electro Disc, giving him control over distribution and ownership. His album, 3 Pairs, 2012, was a critical comeback, landing on multiple year-end best-of lists, and showing that he wasn't chasing radio trends. He was creating art. And let's not forget touring. Dwight has consistently sold out venues across America, and he's one of the few artists from his era who still commands premium ticket prices. His shows aren't just concerts, they're experiences. That keeps the money flowing and the brand alive. Merchandise sales, licensing deals, and soundtrack placements have all padded his bank account further. One source close to the artist claimed that Dwight sees every project, whether it's a film, an album, or a business move, as a building block. Not a moment of fame, but a piece of a long-term legacy. And here's the truth few realize. Dwight never needed a tabloid headline to stay relevant. His staying power came from ownership, patience, and talent. And in a business where most burn out or sell out, he managed to do something very rare: cash in without giving in. When Dwight Yoakam walks into a room, you know it's him. Tight jeans, pointed boots, a vintage jacket, and that low-slung cowboy hat tilted just enough to cast a mysterious shadow. His look hasn't changed much in decades, and that's exactly why it works. What fans might not realize is that this signature style is more than just fashion. It's branding, and Dwight has turned it into a powerful business weapon. In the early days, record executives mocked his fitted jeans and retro sensibilities. But while others chased trends, Dwight doubled down on authenticity. He knew that if he stayed consistent, visually and musically, he wouldn't just be a passing fad, he'd be a legacy act. Over the years, that strategy paid off. His silhouette alone is recognizable without ever seeing his face. That's powerful branding, and brands mean business. Dwight eventually leaned into that image with exclusive merchandise runs, including limited edition clothing items that mimic his own wardrobe. From denim jackets to embroidered shirts and custom cowboy hats, his merch became collector's items, not just souvenirs. One of his most profitable ventures came in the form of a Western fashion collaboration with a boutique designer, where he released a curated line of retro-inspired clothing rooted in his honky-tonk heritage. The items sold out in days, proving his influence went far beyond music. But style wasn't the only area where Dwight made smart moves. Insiders in the industry have whispered about his savvy investments. Real estate properties flipped quietly for profit, startup tech ventures he got in on early, and publishing rights he refused to sell, even when offered millions. Unlike many of his peers who gave away their catalogs early for fast cash, Dwight understood that the long-term value of his songwriting and performance royalties would far exceed the one-time payout. He still earns revenue from licensing his music to films, commercials, and documentaries, and he controls most of that process himself. Beyond that, Dwight's keen eye for storytelling and aesthetics led him to direct music videos, advise on film productions, and even mentor emerging artists. He's built a creative empire that extends into every corner of entertainment. And here's the most remarkable part. He's done it all while avoiding the trap of overexposure. Dwight doesn't flood the market. He doesn't do a million interviews. He doesn't show up at every red carpet. He remains elusive, which only adds to his allure and allows his business ventures to speak louder than any tabloid headline ever could. At 68, Dwight Yoakam is more than just a country music legend. He's a case study in how to build a timeless brand, guard your image, and run a quiet empire, a businessman in boots, and a style icon who turned his personal uniform into a money-making signature. Dwight Yoakam has always been the kind of star who lets his music and his mystique do the talking. But peel back the curtain just slightly, and you'll discover a financial empire that's both sprawling and surprising. Public estimates put his net worth somewhere between $45 to $55 million. But according to industry insiders and financial trackers, that number may be significantly undervalued, because Dwight's wealth isn't sitting in one flashy account. It's woven into decades of strategic choices, diversified investments, and creative ownership. It starts with his music catalog. Unlike many artists from his era who signed away rights early in their careers, Dwight retained control over a large portion of his master recordings and publishing. That means every time his songs are streamed, downloaded, licensed for film or television, or used in commercials, he gets paid. And not just a fraction. Full royalty rights from hits like Guitars, Cadillacs, 1,000 Miles from Nowhere, and Fast as You still generate passive income to this day. And given the resurgence of country classics in film soundtracks and retro playlists, that stream is far from drying up. Then there's touring. Even into his late 60s, Dwight Yoakam continues to fill venues. And unlike some legacy acts who struggle to draw crowds, Dwight remains in high demand. His shows sell out not just because of nostalgia, but because he still delivers. Tight performances, magnetic stage presence, and a devoted fan base that spans generations. With VIP experiences, merchandise sales, and direct-to-fan marketing, a single tour can generate millions in revenue. And he does it without an entourage or bloated production, meaning more profit stays in-house. But perhaps the most overlooked pillar of Dwight's financial foundation is his acting career. Every film role comes with an upfront paycheck, but the real money is in residuals. Titles like Sling Blade, Panic Room, and Crank continue to air on streaming services and cable channels, sending royalty checks year after year. Add to that his voice work, producer credits, and music video directing, and you're looking at a multifaceted income machine. And let's not forget real estate. Dwight has quietly bought and sold properties in California, including spots in the Hollywood Hills and countryside ranches. One source claims he flipped a mid-century property for nearly triple the purchase price after a discreet restoration. Others suggest he owns rental properties under LLCs, keeping his name off public records, but earning steady income in the background. Even his fashion ventures, small batch merchandise, denim collaborations, and custom accessories have turned profit with minimal risk. He keeps production lean and demand high. It's a boutique model that suits his image perfectly. Most telling, though, is how little of it he flaunts. Dwight isn't seen driving million-dollar cars or throwing lavish parties. He's not the subject of wealth exposés or reality TV specials. His version of success is quieter, strategic, grounded, and long-lasting. So what is Dwight Yoakam really worth? Financially, likely more than the headlines suggest, but culturally and artistically, his value is immeasurable. Because, in an industry that's chewed up and spit out even the brightest stars, Dwight not only survived, he outsmarted the system. And at 68, he's still cashing checks from work he did decades ago, all while living a life that's equal parts cowboy cool and business mastermind. Dwight Yoakam isn't just a musician or an actor, or a businessman. He's a blueprint, a living example of what happens when talent meets strategy, when individuality refuses to be watered down, and when a man chooses legacy over limelight. At 68 years old, he's not running from his past. He's walking proudly through the empire it helped him build. The man who once played punk clubs in LA because Nashville wouldn't listen is now one of the most respected figures in both country and entertainment. And he did it without ever compromising who he was. His signature look hasn't changed. His voice, still twangy and sharp, carries the same emotional weight it did decades ago. His stage presence, still magnetic, but what's changed, what's evolved, is his life off the stage. A quiet marriage to a woman he deeply trusts. A son who arrived late in life, but perfectly on time for the kind of man Dwight has become. Homes that feel like sanctuaries, not trophies. Cars that whisper stories of another era. And a financial portfolio that rivals some of the loudest names in show business, all managed without spectacle. There's a kind of poetry in the way Dwight lives now. He's not chasing the charts, not battling for attention, not falling into the trap of reinvention for reinvention's sake. He's found peace in his rhythm and purpose in his privacy. While the industry around him has changed, artists coming and going, genres blending and blurring, Dwight remains, boots planted firmly, eyes shaded beneath the brim of that hat, watching it all from a distance. He's still performing, still writing, still creating, but it's on his terms, with a sense of control that most artists never achieve. And maybe that's the most Dwight Yoakam thing of all. Not the fame, not the fortune, not even the accolades, but the freedom. The freedom to be exactly who he is, no matter what anyone else expects. At 90 years old, Bobby Bare lives tucked away in rural Tennessee, where whispers float about something strange stirring behind his quiet life. A country music legend with more hits than headlines, Bobby has always preferred the shadows. But lately, neighbors have noticed something odd. Visits from music executives, a delivery truck carrying studio gear, and even rumors that he's working on a final project. Some say it's a memoir. Others swear he's recording an album meant for release only after his passing. What is Bobby hiding at this age? And why is he suddenly taking meetings again after years of silence? As one source close to the Bare family put it, he's not done telling his story, but he's going to tell it his way. And when it hits, it'll shake Nashville. This isn't just the tale of a retired artist. It's the beginning of a final act that may redefine how Bobby Bare is remembered, and the quiet power behind his choices is already turning heads. Bobby Bare's success wasn't flashy, but it was steady, and that's exactly why it lasted. While many of his peers fell victim to record label traps, tour debts, and fleeting radio hits, Bobby played the long game. From the moment he broke through with Detroit City, he showed a savvy that set him apart. He negotiated smarter deals, retained ownership over his publishing, and carefully avoided tying himself too tightly to any one label. His music career didn't burn fast. It burned slow, and it's still smoldering today. Over the decades, Bare built a quiet financial empire. He never flaunted it, never bought a mansion in Beverly Hills, and never made headlines for extravagant spending. But make no mistake, Bobby Bare is a millionaire many times over. Conservative estimates place his net worth around $6 to $10 million, but close insiders believe that number could be higher due to unpublicized investments and royalties that continue to trickle in every quarter. Songs like 500 Miles Away from Home and Marie Laveau have been streamed millions of times across platforms and continue to play on classic country stations around the world. Even more impressive is Bare's grip on songwriting royalties. Unlike many of his contemporaries who signed their rights away in the 1960s and 70s for short-term cash, Bobby held on. That decision, unpopular with some label heads at the time, meant long-term security. Those rights bring in consistent money even today. His songs are licensed for movies, television, and documentaries, and his deeper cuts have become prized samples for new-era producers digging into outlaw country archives. He also made smart personal investments. Friends say Bear put money into farmland, recording studios, and even a few small oil ventures in Texas. None of this was ever advertised. He never branded himself as a mogul. He was the guy in the denim jacket, boots scuffed from real dirt, not Hollywood sets. But behind that humble exterior was a man who played the music business like chess, while others were still playing checkers. Now, at 90, he doesn't need to tour. He doesn't need to sell another record. Bobby Bear could live another 30 years off the interest alone from his publishing royalties and still have money left to pass on. He's not just a survivor of the industry. He quietly beat the system, and most folks still haven't realized how. Bobby Bear's home tells the story of a man who never needed flash to feel rich. Tucked away on a modest piece of land just outside Nashville, his main residence is surrounded by trees, a wraparound porch, and decades of silence, broken only by birds, guitar strings, and the occasional old friend dropping by. From the outside, it looks like any other rural Tennessee home, quiet, unbothered, peaceful. But inside, it's a living museum of country music history. Framed photos line the walls, Bobby with Johnny Cash backstage, laughing with Waylon Jennings, and sitting beside a young Chris Christopherson scribbling lyrics on a napkin. Shelves are stacked with demo tapes, handwritten lyrics, and unreleased recordings in boxes marked only by dates and first names. It's not a house that brags. It's a house that breathes. But there's more. Few people know that Bobby also owns a rustic cabin nestled in the Smoky Mountains, a few hours' drive from Nashville. It's entirely off-grid, solar-powered, no Wi-Fi, and no obvious signs of modern tech. According to one of the few producers who's been there, Bobby uses it for something he calls truth time. It's where he goes to write when the noise of the world becomes too much. Some say there's an entire notebook stored up there containing poems and confessions never meant to see the light of day, unless Bobby says otherwise. He bought the land decades ago, long before the Smokies became a real estate gold mine. At the time, people thought he was crazy for wanting a hideout so far from the action. Now, it's become his sanctuary. There's a wood stove, a single rocking chair, and a dusty reel-to-reel tape machine. When Bobby disappears for a few weeks, his family knows where he is. But they also know not to call unless it's urgent. Beyond that, Bobby has refused to buy up flashy real estate in other cities. No California compound, no Manhattan apartment, no beachfront getaways in Florida. For him, Tennessee is enough. The land, the quiet, the history, it all feeds his soul in a way Beverly Hills never could. His properties may not make headlines in luxury magazines, but in terms of value, emotional, historical, and financial, they're priceless. Because every inch of dirt he owns carries a story. And Bobby Bear's story isn't just etched in vinyl, it's carved into the land he calls home. Family has always been a steady but complicated thread in Bobby Bear's life. At 90 years old, he now watches quietly as his legacy lives on, not just in music history books or dusty vinyl records, but in his children, especially his son, Bobby Bear Jr. Their relationship has traveled its own winding road, filled with years of distance, artistic differences, and eventual reconciliation that only age and time could bring. Bobby Bear Jr., a respected musician in his own right, didn't ride his father's coattails. Instead, he carved his own lane in alternative country and rock, often leaning into raw, grittier sounds. At times, his work felt like a rebellion against his father's polished, Nashville-rooted style. But those creative divergences were always underscored by a deep respect. In interviews, Bobby Jr. often described his father as quietly brilliant and stubborn in all the right ways. And as Bobby Sr. aged, the pair found themselves in each other's orbits more and more. Now, they collaborate behind the scenes in ways the public rarely sees. Bobby Jr. handles digital rights, advises on royalty streams, and helps manage unreleased archives that his father has been quietly organizing. And when they sit down together to write, it's less about hits and more about honesty. One source close to the family said the last song they wrote together wasn't even meant to be recorded. It was written just to make each other laugh. Bobby Sr. also has other children, some biological, some stepchildren, who he's kept largely away from the public spotlight. His wife, Jeannie Bear, passed away in 2016, leaving behind a void Bobby still doesn't like to speak about. Since then, he's become more introspective, more focused on putting his affairs in order and ensuring his children understand the value of the life he built. Not just the money, but the meaning behind it. Despite his fame, Bobby was never the dad chasing magazine covers or red carpets. He attended school plays when he could, took his kids on low-key road trips during summers, and made sure they understood that fame was fleeting, but character lasts. One of his grandchildren is rumored to be pursuing music quietly, with Bobby's blessing, but not his guidance. "Make your own mistakes," he told them, "then come back and tell me about them." In the end, Bobby Bear's family reflects the very ethos of his music: honest, gritty, and human. No theatrics, just real life. And while he's always been reserved about personal matters, those closest to him say his greatest pride isn't in his gold records, but in seeing his family carry the torch, on stage, off stage, and in ways the public may never fully grasp. Bobby Bear's car collection isn't something you'd expect from a 90-year-old country music legend. It's not filled with Lamborghinis, Rolls-Royces, or rows of chrome-plated trophies. Instead, it's a rolling museum of stories, vehicles that carry the dust of back roads, memories of late-night drives after concerts, and pieces of Nashville history hidden beneath faded paint and cracked leather seats. His most prized possession, a 1965 Lincoln Continental, black with suicide doors and a leather interior that smells like old cigarettes and vinyl records. It's the same car he used to drive to RCA Studio B in the 60s when he was recording hits that would define his career. Bobby's kept it running all these years, not because it's flashy, but because, in his words, it still hums like a memory. Parked in the corner of his barn garage, it's covered in a thick layer of nostalgia and the occasional wool blanket to protect it from Tennessee's unpredictable weather. Then there's his pickup truck, an old, beat-up 1978 Ford F-150 that's seen more dirt roads than most tour buses. It's dented, dusty, and as reliable as Bobby himself. Friends say he still uses it to haul supplies between his main home and the off-grid cabin in the Smokies. It has no GPS, no Bluetooth, and barely working AC, but it's his favorite. She rattles a little in the morning, just like me, he jokes. Surprisingly, Bobby does own one luxury vehicle, a 2015 Cadillac Escalade, gifted to him by a longtime friend in the business after a particularly successful licensing deal. He rarely drives it, claims it's too quiet and too new, but his grandchildren borrow it on occasion. It sits polished in the driveway, like a fancy guest who showed up to a backyard BBQ. What makes Bobby's vehicles special isn't the price tag, it's the purpose. Each one represents a chapter of his life. The old tour van from the 70s, still parked behind the barn, rusting into legend. The motorcycle he rode exactly once before, declaring, "I ain't got the knees for this," covered and tucked away in a storage unit, collecting stories instead of miles. Bobby Bear never needed speed to prove his worth, and he never needed flash to prove his fame. His vehicles, like his music, were built to last, quiet, enduring, and full of grit. And in a world obsessed with reinvention and rebranding, Bobby's wheels still roll to the beat of his own rhythm. Simple, solid, timeless, just like the man himself. At 90 years old, Bobby Bear's daily routine is anything but typical. But then again, he's never lived life by anyone else's schedule. These days, his mornings start early, just as the sun begins to filter through the trees surrounding his Tennessee home. He brews a single cup of black coffee, in an old percolator he swears by, no matter how many times friends have tried to gift him a fancy Keurig. That morning ritual, coffee, porch, birds, is sacred. "I like to hear the world wake up before it starts yelling," he once said. He doesn't check emails. He doesn't scroll social media. Bobby still writes everything by hand. Ideas, thoughts, snippets of lyrics, on yellow legal pads stacked in a drawer beside his recliner. By 8 a.m., he's usually already jotting something down, whether it's a forgotten memory or a single line that might one day become a song. Some mornings, he'll hum a melody into a tape recorder that looks like it was pulled from the 70s. "It ain't broke," he says, "so I don't fix it." 3 days a week, Bobby meets with a small group of local musicians at a quiet, tucked-away studio not far from his house. They don't record much. Mostly they sit around swapping stories, playing unfinished songs and laughing over old war stories from the road. These jam sessions aren't about making hits. They're about keeping the soul sharp. "Playing keeps my hands warm and my heart warmer," Bobby's told them more than once. Afternoons are slow. Sometimes he'll drive into town for lunch at a no-frills diner that still recognizes him but never makes a fuss. The staff know not to ask for selfies or post pictures. He's earned that respect. He eats light, usually something like grilled fish and vegetables. After lunch, he often visits a nearby independent bookstore, thumbing through biographies, history books, and old poetry. Occasionally, he'll sign a dusty copy of his own autobiography without saying a word to the cashier. Evenings are for the porch. As dusk settles in, Bobby pours a small glass of bourbon, just one, and rocks in the same chair he's had for decades. Sometimes he listens to old records, sometimes just the crickets. He says that's when he thinks about the past the most. Not in regret, but in reflection. "Every wrong turn had a good song in it," he said. Though his body has slowed, his mind is sharp. Bobby reads, writes, thinks, and remembers. He doesn't need much, just time, silence, and space to reflect. At 90, he's not chasing relevance. He's preserving peace. And somehow, in this fast-spinning world, that's become his most rebellious act. Bobby Bare may be retired from the spotlight, but his presence in the music industry is still felt. Stronger than many realize. Behind closed doors, his voice still matters. In Nashville circles, his name carries the weight of someone who not only lived the golden era of country music, but helped define it. He's not interested in awards or legacy tours. He's interested in truth, craftsmanship, and making sure the right stories are remembered. In recent years, Bare has quietly become a mentor to a new generation of country and Americana artists. They seek him out, not for fame, but for wisdom. Artists like Sturgill Simpson, Margot Price, and Tyler Childers have mentioned him in interviews as an influence, not just musically, but philosophically. Bobby's style, unpolished, poetic, rooted in life's quiet moments, resonates with musicians looking to escape the cookie-cutter Nashville formula. When asked what advice he gives them, Bare simply says, "Don't lie. Don't sing it unless you lived it." The audience can smell fake a mile away. He's also taken to guest appearances on lesser-known radio shows and music podcasts, usually ones that dive deep into storytelling. These conversations often reveal a side of Bare most fans never saw. During his heyday, a deeply thoughtful man with opinions on everything from the death of originality in commercial music to the corporatization of country radio. "Country music used to be about people," he said in one interview. "Now, it's about brands." Behind the scenes, Bare has helped produce and arrange tribute albums, lending his ear and experience to projects honoring legends like Tom T. Hall, Chris Christopherson, and even some of his lesser-known contemporaries who never got their due. He believes in giving flowers while folks can still smell them, a philosophy he's carried his whole life. Perhaps most touching is the project he's been working on quietly with his son, curating an archive of unreleased songs, old letters, and acoustic demos to be donated to the Country Music Hall of Fame. It's not about ego, it's about history. Bobby wants the full story told, the heartbreaks, the flops, the nights sleeping in cars between gigs. "If they're gonna talk about me," he once said, "they might as well get it right." In many ways, Bobby Bare is still influencing the direction of country music, not from a stage, but from a porch, a tape deck, and a quiet room full of memories. His silence speaks louder now than most people's shouting. And for those who truly listen, Bobby Bare is still teaching, even at 90. While Bobby Bare has never been a man obsessed with money, his net worth at 90 years old remains quietly impressive, though you won't see him flaunting it. Estimates place his wealth somewhere between $5 million and $10 million, though even that might be conservative. But the truth is, Bobby's never been about the numbers in his bank account. He measures value in memories, songs, and land, things you can't always quantify. His catalog alone, dozens of albums, songwriting credits, and licensing rights, generates consistent passive income, from timeless hits like Detroit City and 500 Miles Away from Home to cult classics that still get played in movies and TV shows. Bobby's publishing royalties have become a steady stream. His decision to hold on to many of his masters, rather than sell them off during the rush of the 2000s, turned out to be a wise one. As country music gets rediscovered by younger generations, his voice is being heard in places he never expected. Streaming playlists, TikTok videos, documentaries. Bobby also owns valuable real estate in Tennessee, land that has skyrocketed in value over the past few decades. His off-grid Smoky Mountain cabin alone sits on a stretch of untouched forest that developers have quietly tried to get their hands on. He's refused every offer. "You can't buy peace," he says, "and I already own mine." But perhaps most surprising is the fact that Bobby has been quietly investing for years. Friends close to him say he has a small but smart portfolio, low-risk mutual funds, royalties management, and a handful of shares in old Nashville businesses he helped bankroll decades ago. One of those ventures, a publishing house he co-founded in the 80s, was recently acquired by a major entertainment group. That deal alone padded his estate significantly. Still, Bobby lives modestly. He doesn't wear watches that cost more than a car. He doesn't own jets or yachts. His splurges are simple: a new guitar, books, music gear for his grandchildren, and the occasional donation to causes that matter to him, like music education programs for rural kids and veteran mental health organizations. He once said, "I made my money slow and spent it slower." And even now, that philosophy hasn't changed. Bobby Bare may be wealthy by traditional standards, but he's rich in ways few people ever become, through art, love, land, and a legacy that's still unfolding. And while the world spins faster every day, Bobby keeps his pace steady, his roots deep, and his wealth quiet. At 90 years old, Bobby Bare is no longer chasing stages or chart positions. He's living in the quiet echo of a life well sung. But what sets him apart from so many of his peers is that he hasn't disappeared. He's not tucked away in some unreachable mansion or lost in the fog of retirement. Bobby Bare is still here, still observing, still thinking, and if you ask him, still learning. These days, he's become something of a mythical figure to younger artists, writers, and fans alike. Not because he demands attention, but because his silence speaks volumes. When Bobby does speak, whether it's through a rare interview, a guest vocal on an indie track, or a handwritten note of encouragement to a young songwriter, it carries weight. His approval isn't given lightly, and in today's oversaturated industry, that makes it gold. What's perhaps most powerful, though, is the way Bobby has chosen to close this chapter of his life with humility and grace. While others scramble to rebrand or grasp for relevance, Bobby's legacy is being defined by exactly what made him special in the first place: honesty, simplicity, and soul. His home has become a quiet sanctuary for visiting musicians, family dinners, and reflection. There's no need for press tours or social media campaigns. He lets the work speak. He's even begun writing his final book, not a memoir, but a collection of lessons, quiet truths. It's tentatively titled Low Notes and High Roads: The Things Nobody Told Me About Country Music. It won't be about scandal or name-dropping. Instead, it's meant for those who are trying to live a life like his, creative, rooted, and free. His health, though stable, has naturally slowed. There are days when he can't play for long, and nights when the arthritis makes his fingers swell. But even then, Bobby says he finds comfort in music he doesn't have to play, listening to old friends. At 92 years old, Willie Nelson isn't just surviving. He's still breaking rules, turning heads, and living like the road is endless. While most people his age have slowed to a quiet hum, Willie's life still blares like an open highway anthem. He wakes up in his tour bus, sparks up a joint, picks up his guitar, and treats every day like it's a song waiting to be written. From his sprawling ranch to his secret mountain hideouts, his lifestyle is anything but ordinary. There are rituals, rumors, and routines that don't just raise eyebrows, they leave people speechless. Friends and family can't believe the pace he keeps, or the things he still insists on doing himself. He's built a world so full of music, mystery, and marijuana that it doesn't feel like retirement. It feels like rebellion. But recently, something new came to light, something that even longtime fans didn't expect. And what Willie just revealed about how he lives today will change the way you see him forever. Willie Nelson was never one to play by the rules, and even at 92, nothing's changed. He didn't follow the traditional path when he was young, and he's certainly not doing it now. He still wakes up on his tour bus most mornings, not in a rocking chair, not in some cushy retirement mansion, but on the road, surrounded by guitars, handwritten lyrics, and the sweet scent of his favorite cannabis blend. His day starts with a stretch, not a shuffle, and the first thing he reaches for isn't coffee, it's a joint. That's not some marketing stunt. That's just Willie being Willie. For him, smoking weed isn't a habit. It's a rhythm, a way to center himself before he writes, plays, or just stares out the window thinking about life. He says it calms his nerves, soothes the aches, and sparks his creativity. And if you've ever heard the songs he's still putting out, it's hard to argue with the results. His bus, the infamous Honeysuckle Rose, isn't just transportation. It's a rolling sanctuary. Inside are shelves lined with old books, photos of departed friends, jars of cannabis, strains with handwritten notes, and, of course, Trigger, his battered Martin guitar that's traveled with him through every era. Willie sleeps in the same small bed he's had for years, keeps his window cracked to feel the wind, and refuses to let anyone else clean his instruments. There's a sense of routine, but not rigidity. Everything he does on his terms. Even at 92, he doesn't take orders, doesn't follow schedules, and doesn't answer to anyone but the music. He'll cancel a show if it doesn't feel right, or suddenly add one in the middle of nowhere, just because the spirit moved him. This isn't nostalgia, it's defiance. A quiet rebellion against the idea that age means limitation. Willie doesn't believe in expiration dates. He believes in staying in motion, and when you see how deeply that belief runs, how fiercely he holds on to his freedom, you start to realize Willie isn't just aging differently. He's rewriting what aging even means. What began as a long-running joke about Willie Nelson being the king of cannabis has quietly transformed into one of the most surprising business ventures in the music world. Willie's Reserve, his personal cannabis brand, isn't just a clever name slapped on some packaging. It's a full-scale operation that he helped build from the ground up, and at 92, he's still deeply involved. Every strain released under the Willie's Reserve label has been personally tested, approved, and often named by Willie himself. Some are mellow and smooth, others hit like a freight train, but they all share one thing: Willie's seal of approval. He's not just the face of the brand, he's the soul of it. Inside his private stash, you'll find handwritten notes on each jar, some labeled with phrases like "good for writing" or "night ride vibes." His home in Hawaii, often thought of as a peaceful retreat, is actually the nerve center for his cannabis empire. On any given day, growers, herbalists, and legal advisors pass through the property, discussing everything from new cultivation techniques to cannabis policy reform. Because what most people don't realize is that Willie isn't just pushing product, he's reshaping laws. He sits in on advisory boards, meets with lawmakers, and donates generously to organizations working to end marijuana criminalization. He's used his platform to fight for farmers, push for equity in the industry, and bring cannabis into the light, not as a drug, but as a medicine and a lifestyle. He's never been shy about his love for marijuana, but now it's more than personal, it's purposeful. And while other celebrity-backed brands come and go, Willie's reserve continues to grow, guided by the same principles that have defined his music: honesty, soul, and authenticity. It's not just about getting high. It's about healing, about legacy, about staying true. And in this strange, smoky corner of the cannabis world, Willie Nelson stands not just as a legend, but as a leader. Willie Nelson's daily routine isn't just unusual. It borders on the spiritual, the mystical, and, at times, the downright bizarre. At 92, you'd expect naps, nurse visits, and slow mornings. But for Willie, the start of each day is anything but ordinary. He rises before the sun, usually without an alarm, and immediately steps outside barefoot, no matter the weather. He believes the earth has a frequency, and he wants to feel it with his own skin. He spends his first moments in silence, breathing in the air and staring out into the horizon, whether it's the hills of Texas or the cliffs of Maui. After this grounding ritual, he lights his first joint, not for fun, but as he calls it, for clarity. Then comes the meditation, a simple session involving a Tibetan singing bowl, a few yoga poses he's adapted over the years, the single strum on his beloved guitar, trigger. That one note, he claims, tells me if today's going to be honest. His breakfast is usually plant-based, something from his garden if he's home, or a green smoothie if he's on the road. But the most peculiar part of his day happens without fail at 3 p.m. That's when Willie enters what he calls spirit hour. No phones, no visitors, no interruptions. Even his wife Annie and his kids know not to bother him. Some say he writes music during this time. Others whisper that he communes with old friends, those long gone like Waylon Jennings or Merle Haggard. A few even believe he uses the hour to reflect on his own mortality. But Willie never explains. He just grins and says, "That's between me and the notes." His evenings are quiet, but sacred. Sometimes he'll walk the property with a flashlight, humming unfinished melodies. Other nights, he'll sit under the stars with Trigger in his lap, strumming the same chord over and over until something clicks. It's not about routine, it's about rhythm, a life in tune. And for Willie, these odd rituals aren't about superstition, they're survival. They're how he's made it this far. Because in a world that constantly changes, Willie Nelson stays grounded by doing the most unpredictable thing of all, being himself. Most artists his age have long retired from the road, choosing comfort over chaos. But not Willie Nelson. At 92, he's still performing, not because he has to, but because he can't imagine life without it. But make no mistake, Willie doesn't tour the way others do. There are no massive entourages, no luxury demands, no preset stadium schedules locked months in advance. Instead, he picks and chooses the venues that feel right, often at the last minute, guided more by instinct than business. He's just as likely to perform at a 20,000-seat amphitheater as he is to show up unannounced at a roadside bar in Luckenbach. And when he plays, it's not a polished, scripted performance. His sets flow like conversations, filled with unexpected detours, long instrumental breaks, and personal stories that spill out between songs. Sometimes he'll stop mid-track, chuckle to himself, and tell a joke nobody else understands. Fans don't come for perfection, they come for presence. Because being in the room with Willie feels less like a concert and more like a spiritual gathering. His band is often made up of family members, sons, nephews, close friends, people who know how to follow his lead, even when he veers off the map. There's no teleprompter, No click track, just feel, just memory. And what happens after the show is even more legendary. While most performers retreat to hotel suites, Willie heads back to Honeysuckle Rose, his tour bus, where the night is far from over. There, he'll invite local musicians, friends, or even complete strangers to climb aboard. Guitars get passed around, joints get lit, stories get told. Sometimes these impromptu jam sessions go until dawn, and sometimes they result in new songs that show up weeks later in his set list. It's his own kind of after party, one where fame doesn't matter, and the only currency is soul. At 92, he doesn't chase applause, he chases connection. And when you witness Willie on stage, giving everything he's got under the soft glow of a spotlight, it's clear. He's not performing out of nostalgia. He's performing because it's still the place where he feels most alive. Willie Nelson may live like a nomad, but the places he calls home reveal more about him than any interview ever could. Most people know about his Texas ranch, the sprawling piece of land where he raises horses, writes songs, and hosts his annual 4th of July picnic. But that's only the beginning. Tucked away in the lush hills of Maui is his Hawaiian retreat, a property that runs completely off-grid, powered by solar panels and surrounded by gardens that grow everything from kale to cannabis. There, the days are slow, the air is thick with salt and smoke, and his neighbors say you can hear soft guitar chords floating across the waves long after midnight. But perhaps the most mysterious of his hideouts is his Colorado cabin, a place so secluded it doesn't show up on maps. It's built right into the side of a cliff, designed for privacy, silence, and reflection. Inside are handwritten journals dating back decades, shelves of philosophy books, framed photos of old friends now gone, and sacred keepsakes that only Willie understands. No staff, no security, just solitude. He disappears there for weeks at a time, unreachable, unplugged. It's his temple, his fortress, his escape from fame and the frenzy of the outside world. Those who've been invited up say it's like stepping into another dimension, somewhere between a church, a library, and a ghost town. But for Willie, it's not about luxury. It's about energy. Each home represents a different part of his soul. Texas is his roots. Hawaii is his peace. Colorado is his truth. And no matter where he is, he follows the same rhythms. Early mornings, sacred rituals, private music sessions, and long, meditative walks through nature. These places aren't retreats from reality. They're expressions of it. They're how he survives the weight of legacy. Because when the world demands more of him than he can give, Willie simply vanishes into one of these quiet sanctuaries, and somehow he always returns with a new song. Even at 92, Willie Nelson remains a magnetic force for some of the most famous names in music, film, and beyond. His homes, especially the Texas Ranch and Hawaiian Retreat, are never short of visitors, but not in the way you'd expect. These aren't flashy parties or photo op gatherings. These are deeply personal pilgrimages. Stars like Woody Harrelson, Chris Christopherson, and Casey Musgraves still drop by, not just as friends, but as seekers. They come for the music, yes, but more often, they come for the peace. Because spending time with Willie isn't like spending time with anyone else. Conversations with him tend to drift into the metaphysical. You'll sit down to talk about songwriting and end up discussing the nature of the soul. He's full of strange wisdom, simple phrases that hit harder than entire books. Let the song play you, he once told a struggling artist who now swears it changed their entire career. He's played poker with presidents, jammed with rappers, and once sat in complete silence with Bob Dylan for 3 hours, neither saying a word, just passing a guitar back and forth. But what really draws people in is the way he listens. Willie listens like time doesn't exist, no rushing, no phones, just presence. There's no agenda, no performance, just shared space. And when it's time to play music, it's always raw, unrehearsed, deeply felt. Visitors say there's something about being in his presence that unlocks a part of them they didn't know was there. It's why so many of his friends call their visits resets. They come not to be seen, but to see themselves again. And it's not just artists, activists, spiritual leaders, even disillusioned politicians have shown up at Willie's door hoping for a moment of truth. He greets them all the same, with a smile, a song, and usually a freshly rolled joint. Some stay a night, some stay weeks, but all of them leave changed. Because being around Willie Nelson isn't just a visit, it's an experience. One that reminds you that fame fades, trends pass, but authenticity? That's forever. To the rest of the world, Willie Nelson is the iconic outlaw, the renegade poet with a guitar, the joint-smoking sage who outlived almost everyone in his orbit. But to his family, he's something else entirely. He's Dad, he's Willie, and that title comes with its own unique kind of chaos. Growing up in the Nelson family was never about normalcy. There were no rigid schedules, no traditional bedtime routines, no soccer practices or Sunday church pews. Instead, there were hotel rooms, guitar cases, smoke-filled buses, and the low hum of an amplifier always buzzing somewhere in the background. Lucas and Micah Nelson, Willie's sons with wife Annie D'Angelo, grew up not just around music, but inside it. They were raised on the road, lulled to sleep by the rhythm of highway tires and their father's weathered voice echoing down from a stage. And yet, despite the turbulence, they speak of their father with the kind of quiet reverence reserved for monks and mystics. Lucas, now an accomplished musician in his own right, often describes his father as a man who lives in pure harmony with the moment. He recalls waking up to the smell of burning sage, watching his father stretch under the sunrise, roll a joint with the precision of a surgeon, and spend the next several hours writing lyrics no one else could have thought of. Micah, a more eclectic artist with a wild creative streak, describes Willie as an antenna tuned to something cosmic. Both sons have followed their father into the music business, but not blindly. They carved their own paths, but the Nelson blood is obvious in every lyric they write, every stage they walk. They carry their father's defiance, his openness, and most importantly, his honesty. But while the public marvels at Willie's charm and mystery, it's his wife Annie who sees the whole picture. She's been with him since the late 1980s, weathering every storm, from IRS raids to hospital scares, from the highs of Grammy wins to the lows of grief and loss. Annie is not just his wife, she's his compass. She organizes his life, protects his health, filters the chaos, and grounds the whirlwind. She manages his diet, his schedule, his medications, and still leaves room for his rituals, his spontaneity, and his fiercely independent spirit. When asked once how she's managed to stay married to Willie Nelson, Annie laughed and said, "You don't manage Willie, you just learn how to dance with him." She knows him better than anyone. She knows when his silence means he's writing something profound, when a certain chord means he's missing someone, when a new strain of weed means he's trying to forget something. And she knows, above all, that trying to change him would be like trying to cage wind. But even with all the quirks, the unpredictability, and the impossible pace, Annie sees the tenderness behind the myth. The man who sings to their dogs when he thinks no one's watching, the father who still checks in on his grown children, the grandfather who lets the littlest ones strum on trigger without flinching. The family doesn't tiptoe around Willie's fame. They embrace it, but they also protect the sacred parts of him that the cameras never catch. They know that behind the outlaw image is a deeply sensitive man who never stopped grieving his lost friends, who still cries when he sings "Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain," and who believes, more than anything, in the redemptive power of love. And while they know the world will one day mourn the icon, they also know that the man they call family has already lived more lives, touched more hearts, and given more of himself than anyone had the right to expect. In their eyes, he's not just a living legend. He's living proof that being unapologetically yourself, no matter how wild or misunderstood, is the greatest legacy of all. And when that final chord rings out, when Willie takes his last bow, his family will know that they didn't just witness history. They lived with it, they loved it, and they helped shape the last outlaw the world will ever know. There's a reason they call him the last outlaw. At 92, Willie Nelson stands in a space that no one else occupies, a living bridge between eras, between worlds, between the man he used to be and the legend he's become. Most artists fade with time, their relevance slipping into the rearview mirror, but not Willie. He's not just remembered. He's still creating, still evolving, still shocking people with how much life he has left in him. He's working on new music. He's still collaborating with artists half his age. He's still touring in that same old bus. And even now, he's dreaming up new ways to use his voice, not just in song, but in purpose. He funds farmers. He fights for cannabis reform. He speaks on animal rights, spiritual freedom, and staying true to your roots. And somehow, through all of this, he still finds time to sit on a porch somewhere, guitar in hand, playing a tune no one's heard yet. But perhaps what's most powerful about Willie isn't what he does, it's how he lives. He lives without fear, without compromise, without apology. He's lost close friends, seen the world change beyond recognition, outlived rivals, critics, even a few of his own myths. But through it all, he's held on to one thing, his authenticity, that unshakable sense of self. He never chased fame. It found him, and he never let it change him. He still writes songs the old-fashioned way, still travels with just enough, still chooses peace over polish. And maybe that's why people gravitate toward him. Because in a world obsessed with image, he remains a man of substance, a man of grit, a man who sings because he has something to say, not something to sell. When asked what keeps him going, he doesn't mention fame, fortune, or legacy. He just says, "I still love the music," and that's it. That's the fuel behind the fire that's burned for over 9 decades. Not glory, not applause, just love. Love for the melody, love for the moment, love for the mystery of life itself. And now, with 92 years behind him, Willie Nelson walks forward not as a relic, but as a reminder. A reminder that growing old doesn't mean growing silent, that freedom isn't a phase, and that the road never really ends. Because as long as Willie has breath in his lungs and strings under his fingers, the music will keep coming, the stories will keep flowing, and the outlaw will keep riding. And when that final note does come, when his boots finally touch the stars, we won't just remember the legend, we'll remember the way he made us feel, wild, real, and beautifully alive.